Ronnie Van Zant told Clive Davis to sign them, or be the dumbest man in music. Their greatest anthem was born at a beach cookout, imagining dead legends rising to play one last show. 3 guitars, 1 Florida Army. Then, the losses came. 2 key members gone within 26 days, and the song's creator dead in his sleep. The song outlived all of them. This is the rise and fall of the Outlaws. Tampa, Florida. Early 1970s. While the rest of the country was looking to Georgia and Jacksonville for its southern rock heroes, a group of young musicians were quietly building something extraordinary in the humid, sun-scorched sprawl of Central Florida. It started, as most great things do, with a handful of guys who refused to quit. Henry Paul, born in New York but raised in Florida, had spent time sharpening his craft in the folk clubs of New York City's Greenwich Village before returning to Tampa with a vision. Huey Thomason, a guitarist of almost frightening technical ability, had been honing his speed and fluidity until his bandmates started calling him the Flame. And when Billy Jones returned from a stint in Colorado as a fully realized guitarist, the final piece of something genuinely dangerous fell into place. Before we continue, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. What they assembled in those early rehearsal rooms was unlike anything else on the Southern rock circuit. The prevailing model, twin lead guitars, as pioneered by the Allman Brothers and refined by Leonard Skinner, was already reshaping American music, but the Outlaws pushed it further. They deployed 3 lead guitarists simultaneously. Thomason on a Fender Stratocaster, fast and fluid and country-drenched. Jones on a Gibson Les Paul, melodic and biting, clean one moment and distorted the next. Paul on a Gibson 330, rooted in folk and country rock, his voice anchoring the whole arrangement. The result was something fans would eventually call the Florida Guitar Army. 3 distinct voices on 3 distinct instruments, woven together into a single, unified assault. But the triple guitar attack was only half the story. What separated the Outlaws from their contemporaries was what happened when they stopped playing and started singing. Influenced by the Byrds and Buffalo Springfield, they built 3- and 4-part vocal harmonies that stood in striking contrast to the raw, bluesy aggression of their guitar work. Henry Paul later described their approach simply: they wanted to sing like the Eagles and play like the Allman Brothers. They earned their reputation the hard way, grinding through the club circuit of Central Florida night after night, playing 45-minute sets with everything they had to rooms that were often half empty. Nobody handed them anything. They built it from the floor up, one sweaty, screaming show at a time. The moment that changed everything didn't happen in a recording studio. It happened in Columbus, Georgia in 1974, in a room that contained one of the most powerful men in the music industry. The Outlaws were opening for Leonard Skinner, learning, watching, absorbing everything they could from one of the most disciplined live acts in Southern rock. Clive Davis, the legendary executive who had just launched Arista Records, was in the audience that night. After the Outlaws finished their set, Ronnie Van Zant, Skinner's own frontman, the man who had defined what Southern rock could be, walked up to Davis and delivered a verdict that has since become part of rock and roll lore. If you don't sign the Outlaws, Van Zant reportedly told him, "You're the dumbest man in music, and I know you're not." Davis signed them. Their self-titled debut album, produced by Paul Rothchild, the man behind the Doors' most iconic records, arrived in July 1975. It cracked the Billboard album charts and eventually went gold. The lead single, There Goes Another Love Song, gave them their first taste of radio success. But it was the final track on side 2 that would define them forever. Huey Thomason conceived Greengrass and High Tides at a beach cookout in Florida. In a moment of sober reflection, staring out at the ocean, he imagined something extraordinary. A private concert where rock's recently fallen heroes, Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin, Duane Allman, Jim Morrison, rose from the dead to play one last show. The title itself was a playful reversal of the Rolling Stones' 1966 greatest hits compilation, High Tide and Green Grass. The song was structurally unlike anything else in their catalog. It opened as a gentle, almost hymn-like ballad, unhurried, reflective, aching with something just below the surface. Then it detonated. What followed was nearly 10 minutes of guitar improvisation. The leads split across the stereo field, Thomason's blazing Stratocaster conversing with Jones's melodic Les Paul in a widescreen duel. Together, they created a sound that felt enormous and cinematic, even on a car stereo in 1975. At a time when the industry was already pushing toward shorter, tighter, more commercial tracks, the Outlaws had delivered an unapologetic epic that demanded patience, rewarded attention, and paid off with one of the most thrilling guitar duels ever committed to tape. It wasn't just a song, it was a statement. The years that followed were everything those early Tampa rehearsals had promised. Between 1975 and 1980, the Outlaws cemented themselves as one of the tightest, most formidable live bands in the world. They weren't just Southern rock royalty, they were a legitimate arena draw, capable of sharing a stage with anyone. And they did, sharing stages with major arena headliners of the era, from British rock royalty to hard rock heavyweights and prog icons. Night after night, in venues across the country and around the world, the Outlaws held their own against some of the biggest names in rock history. For the fans who packed those arenas, seeing them on those bills wasn't just exciting. It was a point of pride. The Florida Guitar Army had proven the Sunshine State belonged on the world stage. Henry Paul later recalled that their first national tour as openers for Lynyrd Skynyrd had been a masterclass in professionalism. They watched Skynyrd every night, studying the discipline and intensity that separated a great band from a legendary one. By the time they were headlining their own dates, that education showed. Their studio work kept pace. Lady in Waiting arrived in 1976, followed by Hurry Sundown in 1977, an album that went gold and showcased Thomason's remarkable ability to write lyrics that felt both personal and cinematic. The title track became a top 60 hit, its guitar work as evocative as anything the genre had produced. But the definitive document of this era wasn't a studio album. It was Bring It Back Alive, released in 1978, a sprawling double live record that captured the band at the absolute peak of their power. The live version of Green Grass and High Tides on that record stretched to 14, sometimes 20 minutes, depending on the night. The guitar duel between Thomason and Jones became something audiences talked about for days afterward. The musicians who came to see them in those years, the ones who watched from the side of the stage at those major bill shows, left with something clarifying. This was not a band that had stumbled into a good song. This was a band that had built something with their hands, refined it night after night, and arrived at something close to perfection. This was the brotherhood at its fullest. Three guitarists moving in perfect formation. Harmonies rising above the stage noise, a rhythm section that locked in and refused to let go. It was the sound of something alive, genuinely, completely alive. They were riding as high as they would ever ride, and none of them knew it yet. The cracks, when they appeared, were quiet at first. They always are. By the late 1970s, the musical landscape that had given birth to the Outlaws was changing beneath their feet. Disco had seized the charts, punk rock had arrived from England with its short, fast, deliberately anti-guitar fury. FM radio, once the sacred home of the long-form guitar epic, was starting to fragment. The industry began chasing shorter tracks, sharper edges, more modern sounds. The sprawling improvisational freedom that had made Green Grass and High Tides a landmark was suddenly being reframed as excess. But the pressure didn't come only from outside. It was already building from within. In 1977, at the height of the band's commercial success, Henry Paul left after a bitter internal split. He had been there from the beginning of the classic era. One of the three voices, one of the three guitars, one of the founding architects of everything the band had built. The official story pointed to creative differences, a desire to move in a more progressive direction. Paul later described the departure as the product of personality conflicts and manipulation, and said he was crushed by it. The bitter irony was not lost on those who knew the band's history. The man who had helped conceive the Florida Guitar Army, who had driven from Tampa to Columbus, Georgia to open for Skynyrd, had been voted out at the exact moment the band's name was worth the most. The dream he had helped build was continuing without him. Whatever the cause, his exit marked the beginning of an instability that would never fully resolve. Lineup changes followed, one after another, each one drawing the band further from the sound and the brotherhood that had defined their peak years. They found one last moment of mainstream success in 1980, when a hard rock cover of Ghost Riders in the Sky reached number 31 on the Billboard Hot 100, and the album went gold. But even that felt like borrowed time. By 1986, with the album Soldiers of Fortune, they had given in to the era's demand for synthesizers and electronic drums, a departure so jarring that it alienated much of the fan base that had followed them since 1975. Musicians in later iterations of the group were called scraping by on meager guarantees while grinding the club circuit, a long, humbling way down from the arenas and the gold records. Huey Thomason was, by then, the only classic-era cornerstone left standing. The band that had charged out of Tampa with 3 guitars and a shared dream was now something else entirely. The name remained, the music did not. And then, in the space of 3 weeks in early 1995, the bottom fell out entirely. On February 7th, 1995, Billy Jones, the man who had played the right channel on Green Grass and High Tides, the Les Paul voice in the Guitar Army, the melodic soul of the band's greatest recordings, died at 45 years old. The news landed with the particular cruelty of something that felt both sudden and inevitable. The years since the band's commercial peak had not been kind to him. The life that rock and roll had promised, the arenas, the freedom, the brotherhood, had given way to smaller venues, thinning crowds, and the slow, grinding weight of a dream deferred. Billy Jones had been there when the Outlaws were everything, and he had watched, year by year, as that world receded. 26 days later, on February 26, 1995, original bass player Frank O'Keefe died of a drug overdose. He was 44 years old. 2 key early members, 3 weeks apart. The arithmetic of it was almost impossible to process. For the fans who had discovered the Outlaws in 1975, who had bought the debut album, who had stood in those arena crowds, who had driven down Florida highways with Green Grass and High Tides pouring out of their car speakers, these losses were not abstractions. They were the end of something that had once felt permanent. Huey Thomason carried on. He spent time in the late 90s and early 2000s playing with a revitalized Leonard Skinner, channeling his gift into another band's legacy while the Outlaws' name drifted. But his heart never fully left the band he had built. In 2005, he reunited with Henry Paul and Monte Yoho for a comeback tour that seemed, for a moment, to promise something new. The fire was still there, the flame still burned. It burned for 2 more years. On September 9, 2007, Huey Thomason died of a heart attack in his sleep. He was 55 years old. The man who had conceived Green Grass and High Tides at a Florida beach cookout, who had played those blazing Stratocaster solos, who had been inducted into the Fender Hall of Fame for the speed and fluidity that earned him his nickname, he was gone. For many fans, that was the moment the story ended. Not with an announcement, not with a farewell tour, just a man going to sleep and the music going quiet. What followed Thomason's death was in many ways the hardest chapter of all, not because of what was lost, but because of what remained. Trademark disputes erupted between surviving members and Thomason's estate, the kind of legal ugliness that attaches itself to legacies like a second loss. Fans watched from a distance, frustrated and saddened, as the name they had followed for 3 decades became the subject of courtroom arguments. Henry Paul felt the weight of responsibility acutely. He had been there at the beginning, in those early Tampa rehearsal rooms when the dream was still just a dream. He had been pushed out at the peak. He had watched the losses accumulate. And now he made a decision that said something essential about who he was. He chose to continue. In 2012, Paul and original drummer Monte Yoho released It's About Pride, the band's first major new studio statement in years. Critics responded warmly, praising the return to the band's original country rock and Guitar Army roots. The album was a hard-fought revival, a statement that Southern rock still mattered, that the music still had something to say. The current lineup performed with genuine fire. Henry Paul was honest about what they were and what they were not. They were no longer arena headliners. They were, as he put it, a cult band, playing with as much commitment as they had in 1975, but to smaller rooms and more intimate crowds. The economic reality of that era was stark for anyone willing to look at it honestly. The band members who cycled through those later lineups recalled living on almost nothing, touring the same highways that had once carried them to sold-out arenas, now pulling into casino parking lots and county fair venues. The dream had narrowed to a corridor, but Henry Paul kept walking it. For the fans who showed up to those shows, the absence was always present. Every performance was a tribute to the ones who could not be there. Every guitar solo carried the weight of the ones that had gone silent. And yet, Green Grass and High Tides refused to die. Through every lineup change, every tragedy, every courtroom dispute, every decade of diminished commercial returns, the song kept finding new listeners. Classic rock radio never let it go. The opening guitar passage still stopped people cold, still triggered something visceral in anyone who had heard it in 1975 or 1978 or any of the years in between. Then, in 2007, the same year Huey Thomason passed, the song reached an entirely new generation through an unexpected door. The video game Rock Band included Green Grass and High Tides as one of its most demanding tracks. Young players who had never heard of Tampa, who had no memory of radio in its golden era, found themselves wrestling with Thomason's lightning-fast solos, trying and failing and trying again. For many of them, it was their introduction to one of the greatest guitar performances ever recorded. The song had begun as a tribute to dead rock heroes: Hendrix, Joplin, Duane Allman, Morrison. It had evolved into an anthem for a generation of Southern rock faithful. And now, in its latest life, it carried something deeper still. When Henry Paul and the current band played it on stage, the lyrics about Green Grass and High Tides no longer referred only to the fallen legends of the 1960s. They referred to Billy Jones and Frank O'Keefe and Huey Thomason. The song had become its own subject, a memorial for the Florida guitar army that had created it. That is the particular power of great music. It grows with you. It absorbs your losses and reflects them back. It becomes, over time, more than the people who made it. The Outlaws gave us a song about honoring what's gone, and couldn't have known it would one day honor them. Every time those opening chords ring out, it's all of them again. The full Florida guitar army, alive one more time. When you hear Green Grass and High Tides, what does it take you back to? Tell us in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories from rock's greatest era.